Hello, my name is Sarah Sturley. I am the Director of Risk Management Education for the MJ Insurance Sorority Division. And thank you for joining me today for the Insurance Basics for House Corporation Volunteers presentation. Because this is a pre-recorded presentation, unfortunately, we can't take questions during the presentation. So if you maybe want to grab a piece of paper and jot some notes, that way if you have any questions, I would encourage you to email them to me or call me with those questions after you have listened to the presentation. So thanks again for joining me, and we'll go ahead and get started. We always like to start off talking about risk management is kind of an overused, nebulous word often, and we just wanted to connect it to being a good sister and a good member of your organization, and just that those two things, really go together, that risk management equals sisterhood. We also wanted to just start off to give you a little background on how we think about risk management. And we really think of it as a continuum. So if we start in the upper right-hand corner, we first try to eliminate the risk. So this might be, for example, in the late 70s, MPC decided just to eliminate the risk of alcohol in the chapter houses. So they mandated that alcohol-free housing for NPC groups. That was a way to just eliminate that risk of alcohol being in the chapter facilities. Next, if we can't eliminate it, we might try to minimize or reduce the risk. And an example of this might be when you're working with an independent contractor. You want to make sure that they're adequately insured, that you have a contract releasing you from their negligence and things along those lines. Then if we can't minimize or reduce it, we would transfer the risk. For those of you maybe that if you rent out your facility in the summer to a third party, something along those lines, we would encourage you to transfer the risk to the tenant. So having them add you onto their policy as an additional insured or something like that. Universities often do this with your groups too. In order for you to be recognized, they require you to be listed on their policy. Them to be listed on your policy as an additional insured. So that's a way for them to transfer their risk somewhat. And then last but not least, we would, from a risk management standpoint, pursue insurance coverage to protect you from an economic loss. And your organizations have purchased an insurance program that is very robust in terms of limits and in terms of the types of coverages to protect you as a volunteer. From a house corporation volunteer standpoint, your kind of mission is threefold. You obviously want to ensure the safety of the facility, minimize liability and property claims, and then protect that substantial financial investment. And obviously all of those things overlap as well. For you specifically as a house corporation volunteer, you are, as I mentioned, covered by this broad insurance program that your organization has purchased through MJ Insurance. The program protects you against third-party claims alleging bodily injury, property damage, or personal injury. It protects all named insureds, so that would include the national organization, the foundation, all chapters, house corporations, and all officers, employees, and volunteers acting on behalf of the organization. The coverage applies to all premises in operation. So premises would be at the chapter facility if you have one. And then also operations, so chapter social functions, things along those lines. It also provides directors and officers coverage, which is an often confused coverage, but this would be things like if you were accused of mismanagement of funds, or someone alleged they didn't like the way you were running the house corporation business, something along those lines. So really the general liability coverage is more important because you have many more claims from a bodily injury, property damage, and personal injury type standpoint, but the directors and officers is an essential component as well. Today, since this is an insurance basics presentation, we're going to go over kind of the four main coverages that impact you as a house corporation volunteer, and those include property coverage, liability coverage, automobile liability coverage, and workers' compensation. There are other types of coverages, and we'll touch on some of them a little bit in the trends section, but these are the 4 main coverages that impact you as a house corporation volunteer. So digging in a little bit to the property coverage provides coverage for any damage to property that the fraternity or sorority owns at the chapter house or otherwise. So if you have a chapter house, that would include things like, the furniture in your formal areas, the furniture in the chapter rooms, things along those lines. If you don't own a chapter house, then it would be things like composite regalia type of equipment, things along those lines. And obviously, if you do own the chapter house, the insurance program would provide coverage for the chapter house as well. Liability insurance is third-party coverage, so that means that it protects the insureds should they be named in a lawsuit from a third party. So a third party would be anybody that's not an insured, basically, as you see that list there. So let's say you serve as the house corporation president, a member is injured climbing out of the fire escape at the house, which is a claim that we had relatively recently, actually. So the chapter member sues you, the sorority or fraternity, the house corporation board, and many others, as usual. So long as you are following the rules and policies of your organization, you would be protected by the insurance program. I'm not going to dig into this example too much. We did create a case study of this exact claim that I'm talking about. So I would encourage you to check that out on our website at mjsorority.com. And it's a good thing maybe to use at a house corporation and board meeting, just to think through some different questions that this specific claim brought up. But there are several other property claim examples and liability claim examples, among others, that just make great conversation starters in meetings, and just to make sure you're thinking through things. Sometimes it's easier to automobile liability coverage. So automobile liability coverage for the sorority or fraternity protects the sorority or fraternity if they're named in a lawsuit because of an automobile accident. So if you're driving on fraternity or sorority business and are involved in an accident, you personally will not be covered by the fraternity or sorority's automobile liability policy. But if the fraternity or sorority is brought into a lawsuit because of that accident, that's where this insurance coverage comes into play. So it's important that your members, volunteers, employees carry adequate limits, which we recommend $300,000 in combined single limits. So that's far above most state minimums. And if you have further questions on this, please feel free to contact me. So we do get questions often, someone calling in, can I be held liable for fill in the blank? And so we added this slide just to say that really, if you can be found liable for many things. That depends on the court and the situation and the judge and many other factors. If you are found liable and negligent, you may have to pay monetary damages to compensate for property damage or physical injury. It means to be held liable that you're responsible for some act or event that causes harm or damage to another. And then we often get the question, can I be sued? And anyone can be sued for anything at any time. Even if the suit's eventually thrown out, you or the organization may still have to cover significant legal fees. There's really so many specifics. The important thing to remember with all of this is if you are acting according to the policies of your fraternity or sorority, their insurance coverage will come into play to protect you. And like I mentioned before, they have very broad coverages and very high limits, really to protect not only the organization, but the volunteers who are the lifeblood of the organization. And then we have workers' compensation coverage, which is basically just a statutory coverage. If you have any employees, if the house corporation does, then you should have workers' compensation coverage. It's mandatory, as I said, and the limits are determined by the state that the employee-employer relationship exists in. But it is very important that you carry that. There are significant fines for not carrying workers' compensation coverage. So that might be something just to check up on every year to make sure you're carrying that if you do participate in an employee relationship. So now we're going to turn the corner a little bit and discuss some claims and trends. From a property standpoint, we are seeing deferred maintenance, maybe things like, not having the roof inspected or maintained. Those things expensive, and just obviously with aging properties, maybe deferring maintenance out of cost, and then maybe sometimes seeing more significant claims occur because of that. As I'm sure most of you are seeing too, increased cost of construction. That's just, keeping ahead of inflation there, really. Fire detection in attics to maintain the sprinkler credit. We have had several claims in the past 2 to 3 years where in sprinklered properties where the fires have started in the attic space, and most the codes required for sprinklers are typically for sorority housing are 13R, and those do not require sprinklers in the attic. So we are encouraging our clients to install heat sensors in the attics, even if they have sprinkler systems. They're very inexpensive, and just a great way both from a life safety standpoint but property damage standpoint as well. There's additional information on that on our website, or you can contact me with any questions you have. Just continuing to keep on top of contents coverage. Contents is basically everything inside your house that the chapter owns. So like I said, furniture, anything inside the walls. And if you don't have a chapter house, then it would be any chapter property like composites and things like that. But we do have a resource on our website called the House Corporation Inventory Checklist. And that just walks you through kind of counting and pricing all of those things to make sure that you do have an adequate inventory of those items. And then also loss of income coverage and how to determine, and more information about that is on our website as well. But we are finding that loss of income and extra expense are making up an increasing percentage of property claims. So that is something definitely to review on your certificates of insurance. Okay, next we are seeing an alarming increase in the number and severity of bond claims. So bond is the coverage that protects you in case of embezzlement or forgery claims. And you should be getting more information about some new regulations that the insurance company is requiring in order to continue to provide this coverage. But it's definitely something that you need to be talking about with your house corporation board and discussing safety measures to make sure are in place so that you minimize or prevent bond and embezzlement claims. Workers' compensation claims, we are seeing an increase typically when the unemployment rate is higher and the economy is hurting. We see an increase in workers' compensation claims. We do have some safety guidelines, a presentation, Safety Basics, on our website that just kind of goes over the most frequent workers' compensation injuries for the sorority program. And we also have a presentation geared towards house directors called On the Front Lines. We're actually in the process of creating a version 2 of that presentation, but that is on our website as well, that I would encourage you to have your house directors just review on their own, and then the Safety Basics for any employees that you have as well. Employment practices liability is a coverage that is coupled with the directors and officers coverage, but it provides coverage for claims, maybe wrongful termination, wage and hour type claims, and things along those lines. And we are seeing an increase in those claims as well. So again, we have plenty of resources on our website to explain that more in depth, and just kind of some checklists to make sure, especially in terms of wage and hour, to make sure you're addressing so that you can minimize or prevent employment practices liability claims. We are seeing a ripple effect of health insurance and economic conditions just with the Affordable Care Act, more people pursuing high deductible plans. We are seeing just that more people than in the past are, when maybe they used to go to their homeowners policy or the chapter members homeowners policy, they're now with those high deductibles thinking about coming to the sorority when the sorority wasn't at fault. So that is just something that we're seeing more in general. This is property frequency across the book of business, and that's the verbiage. Book of business just means all of our sorority clients. That's what we refer to as the book of business. So water damage by far makes up the highest number of claims, and then weather related, so that'd be hail damage, wind damage, lightning, things along those lines, make up the next biggest chunk, and then that last quarter or so are just nothing really standing out there. But water damage is by far the greatest number of claims, and most severe claims too. But one thing that I would encourage you to check out, there are some new technologies available in terms of water sensing systems that can be tied into apps on your phone or web-based, that we're having some clients have a lot of success in. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, I would encourage you to check out our website or contact me. Specifically, we've partnered with a business partner called Total Leaks Concepts, and we are having great success with them. And also the insurance company is actually willing to offer a credit to the insurance premiums for pursuing those types of systems. From a liability standpoint, we're seeing an increase in frequency. That means the number of claims, and severity. That means the dollar cost of claims. So we are seeing a 20% increase in incidents across the book of business. Operations means the just kind of stuff away from the house that happens with a house corporation or a chapter. And then the premises would be stuff that occurs at the chapter facility. So we always kind of thought with general liability, it would be much more skewed to the operations standpoint, thinking about all these social events they have and parties and things along those lines. But really, it's, not quite 50-50, obviously, but much closer than we assumed before we started tracking this data a little bit more closely. And 68% of claims are due to members being injured. Okay, so now we're going to turn the corner again and do a little true or false Mythbuster action. So obviously, since this is pre-recorded, you'll just have to say true or false in your own head, and then we'll do the explanation. So a tree falls during a storm onto a chapter member's car in the chapter house parking lot. The insurance program will cover the damage to the chapter member's car. False. And this is something that you want to make sure is covered in your housing agreements. We have sample housing agreements on the website. We also have a checklist that makes it really easy just to go through your housing agreements and make sure you're covering the necessary things. But the insurance program does not provide coverage for members' personal property, including their vehicle. Now, the only thing that would come into this is, let's say that this is assuming this tree is healthy and, it's just an act of nature that it fell down. But let's say it was rotting and the chapter members kept contacting the house corporation to remove the tree or remove the branch, and if the chapter member, and then it fell down, that might prove some negligence on the part of the house corporation. That might be a little bit of a different story. But if it's just a healthy tree that falls down during a storm, then the insurance program would not cover that damage. Next one, 3 chapter members have a party at their off-campus apartment. The fraternity or sorority cannot be held liable for any claims that arise out of the party. False again. So we're seeing this increasingly, especially maybe with seniors living in an annex or something like that, or chapters that don't have a chapter facility, but maybe, 4 or 5 chapter members live together and it kind of becomes known on the campus as the such and such sorority's chapter house. But we kind of use the if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, it is a duck analogy with this one. If it is what it appears. So if it appears like it's a sorority party, then the chapter members, the chapter officers, those individuals could certainly be held liable for whatever might happen at that party. Okay, next one. If I sign a contract on behalf of the house corporation that has unfavorable contract language, I might be exposing my organization to increased liability. True. So we are always happy to review any contracts with insurance verbiage for you, just to make you feel more comfortable. And but it is something to take seriously, and just make sure that you understand the contract itself and everything that you are agreeing to before you sign it. And like I said, we're happy to review those for you. Okay, the fraternity or sorority's insurance program will protect me if I am named in a lawsuit due to my position with the house corporation, so long as I am acting within the policies of the organization. Hopefully you all answered true to this one, because I feel like I've said it 4 or 5 times today, but it bears repeating. So it should give you confidence that as long as you're following your sorority or fraternity's policies, then you will be protected if you're named in a lawsuit. So I have mentioned the website quite a few times. It's mjsorority.com, and this is a screenshot. We're actually in the midst, just beginning to revamp things. So I would love your feedback and suggestions. If you have a minute to review the website and maybe shoot me an email, that would be great. But we do have literally hundreds of resources on the website currently. We also have created several e-learning or webinars like this one, and we're always happy to create something specific for you. Maybe you're dealing with, I just created one for a group that was having trouble specifically with kind of unofficial chapter houses. So we created a webinar based on that. So just contact me with those questions or suggestions, and typically if it's something you're dealing with, your NPC counterparts are dealing with it too, so you're helping everyone out by coming forward with maybe that question or suggestion. So contact us with any questions. My email address is sarah.sturley@mjsorority.com. That's SARA.Sturley, STERLEY @mjsorority.com, or you can just call us toll free. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Thanks for all you do.